19 of the country's most renowned doctors tried to save the baby of one of the richest men in America, but they all failed. While the mansion was gripped by a silent terror, a 4-year-old girl watched everything from the kitchen. With her sharp eyes and a memory from the past, she noticed what no one else had seen, and with one simple act, the daughter of the housekeeper in that very house achieved something no one believed possible. In a mansion in the Hamptons, New York, at 3 a.m. the faint cries of a newborn baby suddenly stopped. 4-year-old Lily, hidden behind a cabinet in a corner of the kitchen, witnessed the moment. Baby Leo's lips were turning blue, his tiny chest rising and falling rapidly as if life were slipping away. "Quick, call an ambulance!" His stepmother Jessica's scream echoed through the entire mansion. But to Lily, the woman's expression seemed strange. Tears were streaming down her face, but it was doubtful whether there was any real sorrow inside. The mansion's owner, Richard Thompson, rushed downstairs and started making calls. "Get the best doctors here immediately. Money is no object." There was desperation in his voice, but also a hint of something cold. Lily's mother, Maria, had only been working as a housekeeper in this house for a month. Due to her ex-husband's debts, she had to leave their hometown in Ohio and come to New York, clinging to this job with all her might. Lily had been told to be quiet while her mother worked, but for a curious 4-year-old, every corner of this huge house was a wonder. Half an hour later, America's top pediatric specialists began to arrive one by one. An ENT specialist, a cardiac surgeon, a neurosurgeon, a medical team of 9 in total, had turned the master bedroom into a makeshift hospital. State-of-the-art medical equipment was hastily set up in the luxurious bedroom. "His oxygen level keeps dropping," one doctor shouted. "We've tried all airway opening procedures, but he's not responding." Lily watched in silence. The adults were all in a panic, but her child's eyes sensed something was off. She hadn't missed the meaningful glances exchanged between the house manager, Mr. Miller, and the driver, David. The nanny, Mrs. Evans, also wore a worried expression, but complex emotions flickered across her face whenever she glanced at the baby. What Lily found strangest were the actions of the stepmother, Jessica. She constantly hovered around the medical team, asking about the baby's condition, but it seemed like she was actually trying to keep her distance from the infant, as if someone were preventing her from getting close. "Strange. It's like there's something in the child's throat," a doctor muttered, but the other doctors were busy looking for other causes of the shortness of breath. Lily suddenly remembered an incident she had seen in her old neighborhood back in Ohio. A neighbor's baby had swallowed a small marble and had been unable to breathe, just like this. The baby's lips had turned blue then too, and while the adults panicked, an old woman had checked the baby's throat and removed the marble. Lily gathered her courage and approached her mother. "Mom, I think there's something in the baby's throat." Maria tried to shush her daughter, but Lily didn't give up. "Really? The inside of his mouth looks all dark." Just then, the nanny, Mrs. Evans, overheard Lily's words. For a moment, her face went pale. After making eye contact with the other adults, she approached the doctors as if she had made a decision. "Could you maybe check the child's throat one more time? This little girl says she sees something odd." At first, no one took the words of a 4-year-old seriously. But when the baby's condition didn't improve, despite all the methods they tried, one doctor, as a last resort, looked into the windpipe again with an endoscope. "Wait a minute, what is this?" the doctor's surprised voice echoed. On the monitor, a small foreign object was visible deep inside the baby's windpipe. "How did we miss this? We're starting the removal procedure immediately." A frantic operation began, and half an hour later, a small piece of plastic was removed from the baby's throat. Leo finally started breathing normally and crying in a healthy way. As everyone breathed a sigh of relief, Lily read the complex emotions on the adults' faces. Alongside joy, there was also disappointment and fear. A clear expression of shock had crossed the faces of Mr. Miller and David in particular. Richard Thompson came over to Lily and patted her head. "Thank you, little hero. You saved my son." But there was a hint of suspicion in the depths of his eyes. How could something like this have happened? For The next few days, the atmosphere in the mansion seemed calm on the surface, but the tension was palpable. Lily felt the adults looking at her strangely. Some were grateful, while others were uneasy. The strangest thing was the change in the nanny, Mrs. Evans. She tried to be with the baby more often than before and was seen pacing in front of the nursery at night. It was as if she were trying to protect something. One night, as Lily went to the kitchen for a drink of water, she heard whispers coming from a small room. The house. Manager Mr. Miller, the driver David, and the gardener Frank were having a small meeting. "I didn't know it would turn out like this. That little girl ruined everything." It was Mr. Miller's pained voice. "But it's not too late yet. There must be another way," David replied. "What about Mrs. Evans? That woman is changing. I think she's starting to love the child," Frank asked worriedly. Lily held her breath and listened, but she couldn't grasp the full meaning of their conversation. But one thing was certain. These men had a plan concerning Leo, and she had thwarted it. From that night on, Lily began to observe more carefully. Everything seemed normal during the day, but strange things happened at night. Mrs. Evans protected the baby, barely sleeping, while the other staff members seemed to be trying to keep her in check. The stepmother, Jessica, wasn't the same either. She still had a vacant look during the day, but when Lily watched her quietly, she noticed her secretly wandering around the house at night, as if she were looking for something. 10 days later, one night, Lily heard a strange sound in the hallway as she left her room to go to the bathroom. Someone was doing something near the nursery. When she approached carefully, she saw Mrs. Evans sitting by the crib, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry," Mrs. Evans whispered to the sleeping baby. "But I'll protect you now, no matter what." In that moment, Lily understood intuitively. A big secret was hidden in this house, and at the center of it was baby Leo. And her saving the baby was no simple coincidence. It was the disruption of someone's plan. The next morning, news came that Richard Thompson would be leaving on a sudden business trip. In his absence, the tension in the house grew even thicker, and Lily was overcome with an unsettling premonition that she would soon face a terrible truth. On the third night of Richard Thompson's business trip, Lily woke up from a strange dream. It was because of the sound of tiny footsteps in the hallway. When she looked at the clock, it was 2 a.m. Someone was quietly walking toward the nursery. Lily carefully opened her door a crack and looked out. Her stepmother, Jessica, was walking down the hall in a long white nightgown, but her movements were completely different from her daytime demeanor. Her usual vacant stare and dazed walk were gone, replaced by the silent, determined steps of a predator. Jessica paused for a moment in front of the nursery door and looked inside. After seeing the nanny, Mrs. Evans, dozing in a chair, she turned in another direction. Lily held her breath and followed her. Jessica went to Richard Thompson's study. She expertly began to search through the bookshelves, as if looking for something. About 15 minutes later, she found a small hidden compartment by feeling the wall behind a bookshelf. She pulled out an old letter envelope from inside. As she opened and read the letter, Jessica's face grew more and more distorted. She covered her mouth with her hand and began to sob. "So, it's true," Lily heard her murmur. Just then, footsteps were heard. Mrs. Evans had come out of the nursery and was heading toward the study. Jessica quickly hid the letter back in its place and returned to her dazed state. Lily also hurried back to her room and closed the door. When Mrs. Evans reached the study, no one was there, but she sensed something was off. It was the lingering scent of perfume in the air. It was a special French perfume that only Jessica used. The next morning, the atmosphere was even heavier. Mr. Miller had held an urgent meeting with the other staff, and there was a noticeable tension on their faces. Lily's mother, Maria, had also sensed this change. "Lily, the mood in the house has been strange lately. You need to be more careful. Don't get involved in the adults' business," Maria warned her daughter, but Lily had already seen and heard too much. At lunchtime, while Lily was playing in the garden, she overheard a conversation between the gardener, Frank, and the driver, David. They were hidden behind a small shed, talking about something serious. "We're out of time. We have to finish this before the boss gets back." Frank's voice trembled. "But the plans fell through because of Mrs. Evans. That woman doesn't let the child out of her sight," David replied. "We can't forget why we started this. My brother was only 23 back then. The machine at the factory malfunctioned, but the boss cut corners on safety measures to save money. Frank's voice broke with emotion. Lily hid herself even better. She wondered who this brother they were talking about was and what had happened with Richard Thompson. It's been 15 years. My mother died from the shock, and my sister-in-law got sick while raising the kids on her own. It's all because of that man. David's voice was filled with deep resentment. What does Mr. Miller think? Frank asked. Mr. Miller is in the same boat. His father worked at that factory too. He was fired after the accident and the stress. David couldn't finish his sentence. Lily grew more and more frightened. She understood that. All these people held a personal grudge against Richard Thompson, and it was terrifying that this grudge was now directed at the innocent baby Leo. That afternoon, Mrs. Evans's behavior became even stranger. She cried constantly when she held the baby and avoided encountering the other staff members. She especially didn't speak to Mr. Miller at all. During dinner, Jessica still maintained her vacant stare, but Lily knew she was acting. Jessica's eyes would occasionally look very sharp, and she was seen eavesdropping on the others' conversations. After dinner, Lily wandered down the hall, pretending to go to the bathroom. That's when she heard a phone conversation coming from Mrs. Evans's room. Sis, I really can't do it. Every time I see this child, I think of our Daniel. Mrs. Evans's voice was tearful. The person on the other end of the line was saying something, but Lily couldn't hear. I know we had a plan, but this child is innocent. Daniel looked just like this. Mrs. Evans sobbed even more. I don't care what my brothers-in-law say. I'm going to protect this child, even if they call me a traitor. There was determination in Mrs. Evans's voice. Lily wondered who this Daniel Mrs. Evans was talking about was. It was probably the name of a child she had lost. As the night wore on, the atmosphere in the house became even more tense. Mr. Miller, David and Frank held a small meeting and discussed something, while Mrs. Evans didn't leave the nursery. Jessica once again began to search the study in the middle of the night. This time, Lily observed more closely. On one of the letters Jessica found, it said, "To my dearest Leo." The person who wrote the letter was probably the baby's birth mother. As Jessica read the letters, her expression shifted between anger, grief, and shock. So I was deceived. Everything that man told me was a lie, she muttered. Just then, the sound of a baby crying echoed through the house. Everyone rushed to the nursery. Leo had a high fever and was having trouble breathing. What happened again? Mr. Miller asked frantically. Mrs. Evans took the baby in her arms and tried to calm him down, but his condition wasn't improving. We have to go to the hospital, she shouted, but just then Jessica appeared. She was no longer looking vacant. Wait a minute. First, we need to check what this child ate. Everyone was surprised by Jessica's changed demeanor. The woman who had seemed out of her mind until now was suddenly speaking very clearly. Since when have you been so lucid? Mr. Miller asked suspiciously. Jessica replied with a cold smile. From the very beginning. I was acting to protect my child, and now I know who you are and why you came to this house. A silence fell over the room for a moment. Everyone's face went pale, especially Mr. Miller, David and Frank, who realized they had been caught. But just then, the sound of a car was heard from the front door. Richard Thompson had returned earlier than planned. As his footsteps climbed the stairs, everyone froze, not knowing what would happen next. As Richard Thompson's footsteps echoed down the hall, everyone froze. Baby Leo was still crying with a high fever, and the tension in the room had reached its peak. Lily was hidden behind a wall, watching everything unfold. What's going on in here? Richard asked as he entered the room. Though his face showed the fatigue of his business trip, his sharp eyes immediately noticed the strange atmosphere. Jessica was the first to speak. I'm glad you're back. We have a lot to talk about. Her voice was completely different from before. She was no longer the weak, dazed woman. Surprised by his wife's change, Richard asked, Jessica, did you stop taking your medication? Your voice? Yes, I did. 3 weeks ago. I realized I needed to be clear-headed to protect my child, Jessica said, taking the baby into her arms. Mr. Miller interjected, Sir, the baby suddenly developed a fever, so everyone gathered. We might need to go to the hospital. However, Richard was more focused on Jessica's transformation than the house manager's words. "Jessica, what's happening? Did something happen while I was away?" Jessica replied with a cold smile. "It did. A lot happened. For instance, the fact that people planning revenge for a 15-year-old factory accident are working in this house." A silence fell over the room. David and Frank's faces went pale, and Mr. Miller clenched his fists. Only the nanny, Mrs. Evans, was shedding tears as she looked at the baby. Richard's face hardened. "What does that mean? What 15-year-old incident?" "Don't pretend you don't know," Frank suddenly burst out. "My brother died because of you, because you didn't properly install the safety equipment on the machine at the factory. And my father was laid up in bed from stress after being fired because of that incident," Mr. Miller added, unable to hold back any longer. "Our sister-in-law got sick while raising 2 kids on her own." David's voice trembled. Richard took a step back. You're the families of those people from back then." "Yes, that's right," Mr. Miller said with a bitter smile. "We are all the families of the victims of that accident. For 15 years we've been planning to find you and get our revenge." Lily held her breath and listened. Everything was clear now. She understood why these people had started working in this house and why they had tried to harm the baby. Richard sat down in a chair, devastated. So that's why you did that to Leo?" "That was our intention at first," Frank said, bowing his head. "We wanted to take away the thing you value most and make you feel the same pain." "But I can't do it anymore," Mrs. Evans shouted, suddenly standing up. "This child is innocent. He's an innocent baby, just like my Daniel that I lost." Mrs. Evans's confession surprised everyone. She continued to speak through her tears. "My son Daniel was 5 years old. After that factory accident, our family had to move, and in the new neighborhood in a traffic accident." Mrs. Evans couldn't continue. Jessica spoke quietly. "So you were part of the revenge plot at first, but you changed your mind while taking care of Leo?" "Yes. Every time I saw this child, I thought of Daniel. How could I harm an innocent child?" Mrs. Evans said, hugging the baby tighter. Just then Richard asked in a shaky voice, "And the first incident?" David nodded. "We did that. A small amount of a foreign substance in the baby's formula. But that little girl," he said, looking at Lily. "Wait a minute," Jessica interrupted. "There's a more important issue." She pulled out the letters she had hidden. Richard's face went even paler. "Those letters, where did you get them?" "I found them in your study. The letters written by Leo's birth mother, Sarah." There was anger in Jessica's voice. "Sarah," Richard murmured. "According to these letters, Sarah became pregnant with Leo from a relationship you forced on her, and she tried to run away, but you threatened her and stopped her," Jessica said, opening a letter. Everyone in the room was shocked. This was a much darker truth than they had expected. "And there's something else here. In the last letter Sarah wrote just before she died," Jessica's voice trembled. "She wrote that she suspected you gave her poison." "That's a lie!" Richard jumped to his feet. "Sarah committed suicide due to postpartum depression. That's what you told everyone, of course. But this letter has concrete evidence. The name of the medicine you gave her, the date the symptoms started." Jessica waved the letter. As the adults' conversation grew more and more horrifying, Lily also felt the truth coming to light. Mr. Miller interjected. "So, sir, you not only harmed our families, but also Miss Sarah." "No, I loved Sarah," Richard shouted. "Everything was for her." "Love?" Jessica scoffed. "Forcing a relationship, preventing her from leaving, making her have a child, and finally poisoning her is love." "I can prove it," Richard said suddenly. "Sarah has a real diary. It says different things from those letters." Everyone looked at him. Richard ran to his study and pulled a small diary from another hidden compartment. "You'll understand when you see this. Sarah really loved me, but someone was threatening her. That's why she had to write those letters." Richard opened the diary. However, as Jessica looked at the diary, her face hardened even more. This is a fake. The handwriting is completely different from the letters." Just then, Mrs. Evans suddenly stood up. "That's enough, all of you." She was hugging the baby tightly and crying. "The baby is getting worse because of all this fighting." Indeed. Leo's fever had risen even higher, and his breathing had become more difficult. "We have to go to the hospital right now," Mrs. Evans shouted. But just then, the power went out. The entire mansion was plunged into darkness, as if someone had deliberately flipped the breaker. In the darkness, only the sound of the baby's crying echoed, and Lily was overcome with an unsettling premonition that something much bigger was about to happen. As darkness swallowed the entire mansion, the baby's cries became even more desperate. Lily leaned against the wall, holding her breath and watching what was happening. Though the flashlights of cell phones lit up spots here and there, these small lights made the darkness even more terrifying. "Who cut the power?" Richard's panicked voice was heard. "Not me," Mr. Miller immediately denied. "Not me either," David and Frank said at the same time. Just then, something strange happened. Footsteps began to come from the basement. Heavy, slow steps were climbing the stairs. "Is there someone else here?" Jessica asked in a shaky voice. Everyone looked at each other, but no one was expecting a stranger. The footsteps got closer and closer, reaching the first-floor hallway. "Is everyone here?" a strange man's voice asked. The voice belonged to an old man, but it was strong. When a flashlight illuminated the hallway, a man's silhouette appeared. The man, who looked to be in his late 60s, was wearing old work overalls and limped slightly on one leg. Who are you?" Richard asked. The man let out a laugh. But there was no joy in this laugh, only pain. "It's been 15 years, Mr. Thompson." Richard's face went pale. "Could it be Jacob Miller?" "The one and only. You thought I was dead, but I'm still alive." The man named Jacob entered the room. Miller, David, and Frank stared in astonishment. "Jacob, you were alive?" Frank asked tearfully. "Yes, brother. After being in a vegetative state in the hospital for 15 years, I woke up 6 months ago." Jacob's voice was calm, but a deep anger was hidden within. Lily understood. This was the dead brother they had been talking about. But he hadn't died. He had returned after 15 years. "So, all that we did," David said in a shaky voice. "Was it meaningless?" Jacob replied with a bitter smile. "No, what you did has meaning. You fought for our family while I was gone." Richard stepped back and spoke. "Jacob, I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. If I hadn't cut corners on that safety expense—" "Sorry?" Jacob's voice turned ice cold. "Do you know how my family lived for 15 years? My wife couldn't work properly to take care of me. My children grew up without a father." "I'll pay compensation. Whatever you want," Richard said, but Jacob stopped him with his hand. "This isn't a matter that can be solved with money, but after seeing what's happening here tonight, I understand what I really want." Just then, the baby's cries grew even weaker. Mrs. Evans spoke frantically. "This child is really sick. We have to go to the hospital immediately." Jacob looked at the baby. His expression softened. "That child, he's the son of Sarah, who we thought died 15 years ago," Jessica explained. "Sarah?" Jacob asked in surprise. "Sarah is dead." "You knew Sarah too?" Jessica asked. After a moment's hesitation, Jacob spoke. "Sarah was my niece, my brother's daughter." Silence fell over the room again. All the pieces of the puzzle were coming together. "So," Richard said in a shaky voice. "Yes, that's right. After I woke up in the hospital, the first thing I did was look for Sarah, but it was too late." Jacob's voice trailed off. "Sarah died because of Mr. Thompson," Frank shouted angrily. But Jacob shook his head. "No, someone else killed Sarah." Everyone looked at him. Jacob pulled an old photograph from his pocket. "Look at this." He showed the photo to everyone. In the photo, there was another woman next to a young Sarah. When Jessica looked closely at the photo, her face went pale. This woman. She was Sarah's best friend, but she was also the person Sarah feared the most. "What do you mean?" Richard asked. "Sarah sent me a letter before she died. I got it after I woke up in the hospital. In that letter, she wrote that the person threatening her wasn't Mr. Thompson, but that friend." Jacob continued to explain. "When that friend found out Sarah was pregnant, she wanted to use Sarah to extort money from the baby's father, Mr. Thompson. But when Sarah refused, she gave her poison right? Jessica asked, and she wanted to pin all the blame on Mr. Thompson. That's why she wrote and hid fake letters. Lily's head started to ache as she listened to this complicated story. But one thing was certain, the truth was much more complex than they had thought. Just then, the sound of the front door opening was heard. Everyone looked in that direction. "Hello? Why is the power out?" It was a strange woman's voice. Jacob's face hardened. Could it be? The sound of high heels echoed in the hallway, and soon a woman in her late 30s appeared with a flashlight in her hand. She was wearing expensive clothes and had a confident expression. "Everyone's here, how nice," the woman said with a smile. "Am I a little late?" Jacob spoke in a shaky voice. "Chloe, what are you doing here?" "Uncle, it's been a long time. We meet again after 15 years, the woman named Chloe replied with a cold smile. You did that to Sarah." Jacob couldn't finish his sentence. "Killed her," Chloe laughed. "That doesn't matter. What matters is that everyone is gathered here now." She dropped the bag she was holding on the floor. A strange sound was coming from the bag. "Shall we start the real game now?" As Chloe's voice grew, more and more dangerous, baby Leo's cries had grown even weaker. Chloe's cold smile looked even more sinister in the flashlight's beam. As strange noises continued to come from the bag she had dropped, everyone stared at her nervously. Lily pressed herself further behind the wall. "Chloe, did you really do that to Sarah?" Jacob asked in a trembling voice. "Kill her?" Chloe laughed. "Uncle, you're still so naive. I didn't kill Sarah. She committed suicide." "You're lying!" Jessica shouted. "The letters clearly state—" "Oh, those letters." Chloe tilted her head. "I made Sarah write them to frame Richard Thompson." Richard's face went ashen. "So Sarah really did commit suicide?" Chloe let out a cold laugh. "I don't know if you'd call it suicide. I gave Sarah a choice. Either she could die with her baby, or she could leave the baby and die alone." Everyone in the room was in shock. This was a far more ruthless truth than they could have imagined. Why would you do something like that?" Mrs. Evans asked in a shaky voice. "For money," Chloe replied nonchalantly. "When I found out Sarah was carrying Richard Thompson's child, I saw it as a huge opportunity. Alimony, damages. I could have lived comfortably for the rest of my life." "But Sarah refused," Jacob murmured. "That naive girl kept talking about love, saying she really loved Richard Thompson. She had no intention of taking the money and leaving quietly." There was contempt in Chloe's voice. Jessica trembled with rage. "That's why you threatened her." "Threatened is a bit of an understatement," Chloe laughed. "I gave Sarah small doses of poison. I made her think the pain in her body was normal because she was pregnant." Baby Leo's cries were growing fainter. Mrs. Evans spoke frantically. "Let's talk about this later. We need to get this child to the hospital." "No," Chloe cut her off. "We're not done yet." She opened her bag. Inside were a small voice recorder and several USB drives. "These contain all the evidence I've collected over the past 15 years. Richard Thompson's corrupt dealings, his relationship with Sarah, and—" She paused for a moment. "Everything that has happened in this house." "What do you mean?" Mr. Miller asked. "Security cameras. There are hidden cameras all over this house. Your revenge plans, the moments you tried to harm the baby, it's all recorded." Everyone's face went pale. Mr. Miller, David, and Frank looked completely hopeless, and most importantly, Chloe pulled out another USB drive. "The video Sarah left in her final moments, even the moment I gave her the poison, is recorded." Jacob trembled with rage. You're wondering why I did it, aren't you?" Chloe laughed. "Simple. I needed money, and Sarah was getting in the way of my plans." "So what do you want now?" Richard asked. "Simple. You'll give me the money I want and cover this whole thing up, then this evidence will be buried forever." "And if we refuse?" Jessica asked. "Then these videos will be sent to every news outlet. Richard Thompson will be a murderer, and you all will be guilty of attempted child abuse," Chloe replied with a cold smile. Just then, baby Leo's crying stopped completely. When Mrs. Evans quickly checked on him, she saw that the baby had lost consciousness. "Oh no, this child!" Mrs. Evans panicked. "We have to go to the hospital right now," Jessica shouted. But Chloe blocked their way. "I haven't gotten your answer yet." "You crazy woman," Jacob raged. "The child is dying." "Is that my problem?" Chloe said mockingly. "That child was just a tool for Sarah's revenge anyway." Lily couldn't take it anymore. She came out from her hiding place and shouted loudly, "Stop! The baby didn't do anything wrong." Everyone looked at Lily in surprise. Chloe, in particular, was met with an unexpected reaction. "Who is this child?" Chloe asked. "She's my daughter." Maria appeared from the darkness. She stepped in front of Lily with a mother's instinct to protect her child. Hiding behind her mother, Lily spoke bravely. "The baby didn't do anything bad. Why are you just leaving a sick baby?" Like that. When Chloe looked at Lily, her expression suddenly changed. "Strange. This child, she's the one I saw on the cameras." "What do you mean?" Maria asked. "This child stopped the first incident. The one who told the adults when the baby was choking." Chloe's voice grew more and more dangerous. "So my plan was ruined because of this child." Chloe took a step toward Lily. Maria hugged her daughter tighter. "Don't you touch my daughter. More than touching. I need to shut her up. This child has seen too much." Chloe started to pull something else out of her bag. Just then, the sound of a siren was heard in the distance. It was an ambulance. "Who called?" Chloe asked frantically. Mrs. Evans smiled and showed her phone. "I've been on the line with 911 for a while. Your entire conversation should be recorded." Chloe's face went pale. "Damn it, the plan is ruined." But she didn't give up. "Then it's time to really finish this." The last thing Chloe pulled from her bag was a small syringe. It contained a clear liquid. "This is what I sent Sarah off with. Now I'll send her child to be with his mother." Chloe moved toward the baby. Everyone tried to stop her, but in the darkness caused by the power outage, it was hard to pinpoint her exact location. But just then, the sound of several more cars was heard from outside the house. It wasn't just an ambulance. Police cars had also arrived. "It's over, Chloe," Jacob said. But in a final effort, Chloe raised the syringe and lunged toward the baby. It was a critical moment that would determine everyone's fate. The moment Chloe raised the syringe and lunged at the baby, Mrs. Evans threw herself in front of her. A fierce struggle between the two women began in the darkness. "Get out of my way. This needs to end," Chloe shouted, brandishing the syringe. "No, this child is innocent." Mrs. Evans resisted. During the scuffle, the syringe fell to the floor and shattered. A strange odor filled the air as the clear liquid spilled. "You've ruined everything," Chloe screamed in fury. Just then, the front door burst open and paramedics rushed in. Their powerful flashlights illuminated the room. "We got a report of a patient here," one of them called out. "Over here, the baby is in bad shape." Mrs. Evans scooped Leo into her arms and ran toward them. The paramedics immediately began to check the baby's condition. "His body temperature is very high and he's dehydrated. We need to get him to the hospital immediately." At that moment, police officers also entered. "We're here in response to a call. A report of child abuse was made." Chloe backed away in panic, but it was too late. Thanks to Mrs. Evans's phone call, the entire conversation had been recorded, and the police were beginning to understand the situation. "Everyone, show me your IDs and explain." "What's going on?" a police officer said. Just then, the power came back on throughout the mansion. As the bright lights flickered on, everyone's expressions were clearly revealed. As the paramedics placed the baby on a stretcher, one asked, "Who's the next of kin? Someone needs to accompany him to the hospital." Jessica stepped forward. "I'm his mother." "No," Chloe interjected suddenly. "That woman is just his stepmother. His real mother is dead." The police officer asked curiously, "Could you please explain in detail what happened?" Richard spoke in a shaky voice. I'll tell you everything." But Chloe stopped him. "Wait, before you say anything, I have something to show you." She handed a USB drive to the police officer. "The whole truth is on here. Starting from the factory accident 15 years ago to Sarah's death," Jacob cut in. "Chloe, that's enough. It's over." "It's not over, Uncle," Chloe screamed hysterically. "My plan of 15 years can't be ruined like this." The police officer tried to get the situation under control. "First, those who need to go to the hospital should go. The rest of you will come with us to the station to give your statements." As the baby was taken to the hospital, Mrs. Evans and Jessica went with him. The others were taken to the police station. Lily clung tightly to her mother, Maria. "Mom, is the baby going to be okay?" "He'll be okay, Lily. The baby was saved because you were brave," Maria comforted her daughter. The interrogation began at the station. Everyone gave their statements in separate rooms, and the evidence Chloe had brought was examined. Mr. Miller, David, and Frank confessed to their revenge plot. "We made a mistake, but we never really wanted to harm the child." Jacob told his story of 15 years. "After I woke up from the vegetative state, I just wanted to find out the truth." Richard admitted to his past mistakes. "It was my responsibility for cutting corners on safety costs 15 years ago, but I didn't kill Sarah." Most importantly was Chloe's statement. Although she tried to deny everything at first, the evidence she brought had turned against her. "Everything will be clear once we watch the video on the USB," an interrogating officer said. When the video was examined, the footage Sarah had left in her final moments was found. The video showed the moments Chloe gave her the poison and Sarah's final message. "My Leo, I'm sorry your mother couldn't protect you, but one day, good people will take care of you. And Chloe, if you're watching this, heaven will not forgive you." This video clearly established Chloe's guilt. She had meticulously planned for 15 years, only to be brought down by the evidence she herself had left behind. A few days later, baby Leo recovered in the hospital. His condition had been serious, but thanks to the doctor's efforts, he was out of danger. Jessica spoke as she watched the baby in the hospital room. "From now on, I will truly raise you as my own son. I will give you the love that Sarah couldn't." Mrs. Evans also visited the room. "Can I continue to look after Leo? This child is like Daniel to me." "Of course. We will all raise this child together," Jessica smiled. Meanwhile, Richard decided to take responsibility for the factory accident 15 years ago. "I will pay the victims' families the compensation they deserve, and I will establish a foundation for workplace safety." Jacob accepted Richard's offer. "But you know this isn't something that can be solved with money, right? What's important is sincere remorse and the steps you take from now on." Mr. Miller, David, and Frank felt deep regret for their actions. "We were about to endanger an innocent child out of a thirst for revenge." Lily and Maria continued to work in that house. Lily became Leo's big sister, while Maria was no longer seen as a housekeeper, but as part of the family. However, not all problems were solved. There was another secret Chloe had left behind, and this secret was about to threaten everyone's peace once again. A lawyer, visiting Chloe in the hospital, was preparing to drop a new bombshell. A week later, Leo was discharged from the hospital, but the peace didn't last long. A lawyer, Mr. Peterson, who had visited the incarcerated Chloe, arrived at Richard Thompson's mansion. "Mr. Thompson, a pleasure to meet you. I'm Mr. Peterson, Chloe's attorney," he said with a polite but cold smile. Richard received him in his study. Jessica and Jacob were also there. "Is there something else to discuss regarding Chloe?" "Yes, a very important matter." Mr. Peterson opened his briefcase. "There's one more thing my client left behind." He pulled out a sealed envelope. "Ms. Chloe entrusted this to me just before she was arrested. She said, 'Open it when it's all over.'" Jessica asked anxiously, "What's inside?" "The results of a DNA test." Mr. Peterson dropped the bombshell. Silence fell over the room. Jacob asked in a shaky voice, What DNA test?" "The results of a test proving that Richard Thompson is not baby Leo's biological father." Mr. Peterson unfolded the documents. Richard's face went ashen. "That's impossible. Sarah and I—" "Ms. Sarah was already pregnant a month before she met Mr. Thompson. The real father is someone else." Jessica collapsed into a chair. So Leo is— And there's an even more shocking truth." Mr. Peterson pulled out another document. "We've also discovered who the real father is." Everyone held their breath. "Mr. Jacob Miller." Jacob shot to his feet. "That's absurd. I was in a vegetative state for 15 years." "That's true, But on the day of the accident, a few hours before it happened, there's a witness who saw you and Miss Sarah together." Mr. Peterson continued to explain. "Miss Sarah was in love with you, and on the day of the accident, she confessed her love to you and what happened that night?" Jessica asked in a trembling voice. "Miss Sarah became pregnant, but the next day, when you had the accident and fell into a vegetative state, Miss Sarah was left to raise the child alone." Jacob was in shock, unable to speak. He had woken up after 15 years to learn he had a son. "Then why did Sarah get involved with Richard?" Jessica asked. "It must have been due to financial hardship. It was difficult to raise a child alone. That's why she approached Mr. Thompson and asked for help." Richard nodded. "Sarah was in a very difficult situation back then. I just wanted to help. But Miss Chloe used this entire situation. She threatened Miss Sarah and made her believe that Mr. Thompson was the child's father." Jacob buried his face in his hands. So Leo is really my son?" Just then, Mrs. Evans entered the room, holding the baby. Baby Leo had recovered his health and was smiling sweetly. The moment Jacob looked at the baby, he burst into tears. "Is he really my son?" Mr. Peterson replied. "The DNA test results are a 99.9% match," Mrs. Evans spoke in astonishment. "So the baby I've been taking care of is Mr. Miller's biological son," Mr. Peterson confirmed. Everyone in the room was filled with complex emotions. Joy, shock, and confusion were all mixed together. Jessica spoke with a sad smile. Then I'm no longer." "No," Jacob said quickly. "You've cared for Leo like a real mother. Blood ties aren't everything." Richard agreed. "I also see Leo as my own son. That can't change now." However, Mr. Peterson's expression showed that it wasn't over yet. "Actually, there's a more complicated problem." "What else could therapy?" Richard asked in a tired voice. "While Mr. Miller was in a vegetative state, he was legally declared dead in absentia, and Ms. Sarah has also passed away." "What does that mean?" Jessica asked. "It means that Leo is legally an orphan, and Mr. Miller has to go through a complicated process to legally prove his existence." Jacob's face filled with despair. "So I won't be able to raise my own son?" "That's not all." Mr. Peterson dropped the final bombshell. "There's also evidence that Ms. Chloe forged Ms. Sarah's will." "A will?" Everyone was surprised. "Ms. Sarah's real will said, 'I entrust Leo to Jacob,' but Ms. Chloe changed it to, 'I entrust him to Richard Thompson.'" These words made everyone realize once again how meticulously Chloe had planned everything. Lily entered the room with her mother, Maria. Seeing the serious faces of the adults, she asked, "What happened? Did something bad happen to Leo again?" Maria tried to calm her daughter, but Lily could sense the gravity of the situation. Jacob knelt down to Lily's eye level. "Lily, the baby you saved, it turns out he's my son." Lily looked at him with innocent eyes. "Isn't that a good thing?" "Uncle, if you're the baby's father, you can take better care of him." But the adults' faces were grim. The legal issues were very complicated, and the matter of who would raise Leo was unresolved. Just then, Mr. Peterson added one last thing. "And Ms. Chloe attempted suicide in prison. She's in intensive care right now." This news shocked everyone once again. If Chloe died, the remaining secrets and evidence could be lost forever. "Should we go to the hospital?" Jessica asked, but Jacob shook his head. "We have nothing more to do with that woman. What's important is Leo." But just then Mr. Peterson's phone rang. When he answered, his face went pale. "Ms. Chloe has woken up, and she wants to say one last thing." Everyone looked at him. The worry that Chloe might have one last thing to say, one more secret to reveal, gripped them all. In the car on the way to the hospital, everyone was silent. Jacob stared out the window, unable to hide his complex emotions. The reality of waking up after 15 years to learn he had a son and that his son was in danger was overwhelming. Jessica held Leo in her arms. Even though she now knew this child wasn't her biological son, she couldn't let him go. She had experienced true maternal feelings over the past few months. "What else could Chloe possibly have to say?" Richard murmured. Mr. Peterson replied, "Perhaps it's a final pang of conscience. She might want to confess everything on the brink of death." When they arrived at the hospital, the intensive care unit was under tight security. Since Chloe was a prisoner, police officers were on guard. "Visits will be one at a time," the nurse explained. Jacob went in first. Chloe was lying with an oxygen mask on, her face pale. When she saw Jacob, she started to cry. "Uncle, I'm so sorry." Chloe's voice was barely audible. "Why did you do it, Chloe?" Jacob asked with a sad voice. "It was for the money, but that wasn't all," Chloe said with difficulty. "What do you mean?" I really loved Sarah. But she only had eyes for you," Chloe confessed. Jacob was shocked. "You loved Sarah?" "Yes, I'm attracted to women. And when I found out Sarah loved you, and I got so jealous." This confession changed everything. A lover's jealousy was at the root of all of Chloe's actions. "That's why on the night of the accident, when I found out you were working overtime at the factory, I deliberately sabotaged the machine," Chloe confessed to an even greater crime. Jacob's face went pale. You caused my accident? When I saw my sister suffering because of you, I thought if you disappeared, she would turn to me." Jacob was filled with anger and despair. He couldn't accept that his 15 years of suffering were because of Chloe's jealousy. "But my sister was even more devastated. And when she found out she was pregnant with your child," Chloe's voice trailed off. "Is that why you killed Sarah?" "No. At first I wanted to protect her, but as she kept mentioning you, that's when I gave up and activated the revenge plan." Jacob couldn't listen anymore and left the room. His face was filled with despair. The next visitor was Richard. When Chloe saw him, she wore a different expression. "Mr. Thompson, I told you another lie," Chloe said. "What lie now?" "Sarah, she really did love you. I didn't push her toward you. She came of her own free will." Richard was surprised. "So Sarah loved me?" "Yes. Even though she was carrying my uncle's child, she wanted to choose you. She said it was for the child's future." These words put Richard in an even more complicated situation. He was only now learning Sarah's true feelings. "So could I have really loved Sarah?" "Yes, but I prevented it. I ruined everything because of my jealousy." After Richard left, Jessica was the last to go in. When Chloe saw her, she wore a sad expression. "Ma'am, I'm truly sorry. You were completely innocent. It's too late for apologies now," Jessica said in a cold voice. "I want to tell you one last thing. Leo, he's a very lucky child, thanks to you." Jessica's expression softened a little. "Are you being sincere?" "Yes. I watched from the security cameras the way you looked at Leo. It was like a real mother." After the visits were over, everyone gathered in the hospital lobby. They tried to make sense of the situation by sharing what they had heard from Chloe. "In the end, it all started with Chloe's jealousy," Richard sighed. "But what's important now is the future," Jacob said. "Who will raise Leo?" Just then, Mr. Peterson came with new information. The court called. "A temporary guardian needs to be appointed." "A temporary guardian?" Jessica asked. "Until Mr. Miller's legal status is resolved, someone needs to be appointed to care for the child." Jacob immediately spoke up. "Of course, but Mr. Miller, you don't legally exist yet. You have to go through a complicated process." "So what do we do?" Jessica asked worriedly. "Someone has to take on the temporary guardianship, and the court will evaluate whether that person is suitable." Jessica gathered her courage and spoke. "I'll do it. I'll continue to take care of Leo." Jacob objected. "No, I should raise my son." "But it's not legally possible yet," Jessica retorted. A tension formed between them. They both truly loved Leo, but their love was now in conflict. Richard tried to intervene. "Let's calm down first. Let's try to solve the legal issues." "It doesn't matter if the legal issues are solved," Jacob said with determination. "Someone else can't raise my blood." "Someone else?" Jessica looked hurt. "What have I been to Leo for the past few months?" Just then, Lily interjected. "Why are you fighting? Can't everyone just love Leo?" The adults paused for a moment. The innocent words of a 4-year-old had momentarily stopped their complex emotions. But just then, Mr. Peterson's phone rang again. When he answered, his face hardened. "What happened?" Richard asked. "Miss Chloe was lost consciousness again, and the doctor says her condition is truly critical this time." Everyone tensed up. If Chloe died, any secrets that hadn't yet come to light could be buried forever. And Mr. Peterson's expression grew even more serious. Miss Chloe said one last thing. She said, "It's not over yet." These words worried everyone. Did Chloe have another secret, or was there another accomplice? Just then, a strange man appeared in the hospital lobby. He looked to be in his mid-50s and was wearing an expensive suit. "Are you Mr. Thompson?" the man asked, approaching Richard. "Yes, but you are—" "I'm Chloe's father, and I have something to tell you." Everyone looked at him. The appearance of Chloe's father was unexpected, and they wondered what he had to say. "I know my daughter has harmed you, but Chloe didn't actually do this alone." These words horrified everyone. There was another accomplice. The appearance of Chloe's father made the atmosphere in the hospital lobby even heavier. The man who introduced himself as Robert had a look of deep exhaustion and guilt on his face. "What do you mean your daughter didn't do this alone?" Richard asked in a trembling voice. Robert looked around and suggested they move to a quieter place. Everyone moved to a hospital consultation room, and Robert began to speak heavily. 15 years ago, I worked as the safety manager at Mr. Thompson's factory." This first sentence shocked everyone. Jacob jumped to his feet. "So the safety equipment—" "Yes, I was the one who suggested to Mr. Thompson that we delay the installation of the safety equipment to cut costs." Richard's face went pale. "Mr. Robert, were you the Robert from back then?" "Yes, and because of my decision, Mr. Miller had his accident. It was my fault." Jessica tried to understand. "So if you were also guilty, why the revenge?" "That's the whole point," Robert said, bowing his head. "I lived with guilt, and Chloe grew up watching a father like that. She lived with the story someone got hurt because of us since she was a child." Lily held her mother Maria's hand tightly, listening to this complicated story. It was a difficult topic for a 4-year-old, but she understood the seriousness of the situation from the sad faces of the adults. "So that's why Chloe planned her revenge," Mr. Peterson summarized. "That's how it started. But the plan changed later." Robert's face grew even darker. "Changed?" "After Chloe met Miss Sarah, it became less about revenge and more about another feeling." Jacob trembled with anger. "That other feeling led Sarah to her death." "True, but the reason I said Chloe didn't do it alone was because I helped her." Silence fell over the room. A father was confessing to being an accomplice in his daughter's crime. "How did you help?" Jessica asked. "I found the poison. I have a background in the chemical industry." Robert's confession horrified everyone. And he continued to reveal an even more shocking truth. "I was the one who introduced Miss Sarah to Mr. Thompson." "What?" Richard shouted. "I left the company after the accident 15 years ago, but I always kept an eye on Mr. Miller's niece, Miss Sarah, from a distance, out of guilt." Jacob clenched his fists. "So you used Sarah?" "My intention at first was to help, but when Chloe started developing feelings for Miss Sarah, the plan got out of control." Robert continued to explain. "Chloe asked me to introduce Miss Sarah to Mr. Thompson. I just thought Miss Sarah could get some financial support, but Chloe's real goal was to control and manipulate Miss Sarah," Mr. Peterson finished. "And what I regret the most—" Robert's voice trembled. "Is that when Chloe wanted to give Miss Sarah the poison, I should have stopped her, but I couldn't." Jessica trembled with rage. "You're an accomplice." "Yes. That's why I came to turn myself in," Robert said, bowing his head. Just then, frantic footsteps were heard. A nurse burst into the consultation room. "Miss Chloe is awake, but she's saying strange things." Everyone rushed to the intensive care unit. Chloe had taken off her oxygen mask and was murmuring something. "It's not over yet. Sarah? There's something Sarah left behind." Jacob approached her. "What did she leave?" "A video. The last video." Chloe said with difficulty. I didn't hide it. Sarah hid it herself. Where did she hide it? Richard asked hastily. In Leo's room. Just as Chloe was about to finish her sentence, an alarm sounded from the heart monitor. The medical team rushed into the room and began to intervene. Chloe's condition had suddenly worsened. Everyone, please step outside, the doctor shouted. Back in the lobby, everyone was in a state of shock. They didn't know how to interpret the information that Sarah's last video was hidden in Leo's room. We need to go home and search immediately, Jacob said. But we don't even know what we're looking for, Jessica worried. Robert interjected. I can help. I know how Miss Sarah used to hide her things. Can we trust you? Richard asked suspiciously. You don't have to, but I can help you find the truth. An hour later, everyone was back at the mansion. Leo's room had been tidied up after the baby was discharged, but his things were still in place. Where should we start? Jessica asked. Robert surveyed the room and spoke. Miss Sarah had a tendency to hide important things in items related to the child. They began to search the crib, the toy box, the closet, one by one. Lily also helped the adults by looking in small places. An hour later, Lily noticed something strange under the crib. There's something taped here, Lily shouted. Everyone gathered around. A small USB drive was taped to the underside of the crib. This must be it, Robert said, carefully removing the USB. Richard immediately brought a laptop and plugged in the USB. Sarah's face appeared on the screen. She looked pale, but her gaze was determined. If you're watching this video, Chloe has probably confessed everything. Sarah's voice filled the room. I want to tell the truth. Leo's father is Jacob, but Richard is also a dear person to me. Jacob and Richard looked at each other. And I want to tell Chloe, I understand your feelings, but love cannot be forced. The video continued. What I'm most worried about is Leo. I don't want this child to suffer because of the wrong decisions of adults. Just then, the Sarah in the video moved closer to the camera. And there's one last truth I want to reveal. It's true that Chloe gave me poison, but the reason I drank that poison was... At that exact moment, the power went out. The screen went black and the room was plunged into complete darkness. They hadn't been able to hear Sarah's final words. As the room was plunged into darkness by the power outage, everyone panicked. They were just about to learn Sarah's final truth. Richard immediately turned on his phone's flashlight and checked the laptop. It still has battery, but why did it shut down? Richard muttered. Robert went to the window and looked outside. It seems like the power is out in the whole house. But it's strange. The lights in the other houses are on. Did someone cut the power on purpose? Jacob asked suspiciously. Just then, footsteps were heard from downstairs. Everyone tensed up. There shouldn't have been anyone else in the house. Who came in? Jessica asked, hugging Leo tighter. Lily held her mother Maria's hand tightly. The footsteps in the darkness were getting closer. Folks, are you up there? A strange woman's voice called from the bottom of the stairs. Robert's face went pale. Could it be... Robert, can you hear me? The woman said as she climbed the stairs. Who are you? Richard shouted. My name is Diane. I'm Chloe's biological mother. Everyone was shocked. Robert spoke in a shaky voice. Diane, what are you doing here? Why wouldn't I come when my daughter is on her deathbed? The woman named Diane entered the room. She looked to be in her early 50s and had a look of deep anger on her face. You're Chloe's mother? Jessica asked in surprise. Yes, and I'm the real beginning of all these events, Diane replied with a cold smile. Robert spoke in a panic. Diane, you left 15 years ago. Why now? I didn't leave. You threw me out, Diane shouted. Jacob tried to understand. What are you two talking about? Diane turned to Jacob and spoke. That accident 15 years ago. It's true that Robert wanted to remove the safety equipment, but there was a reason for it. What reason? Richard asked. I threatened him to remove the safety equipment and create an accident. The room fell into complete silence. This was a shocking confession that no one had expected. Why would you do something like that? Jacob asked in a trembling voice. For revenge. My family was ruined because of Richard Thompson. Diane began to explain. 20 years ago, my father had a work accident at another one of Mr. Thompson's factories. But Mr. Thompson didn't pay proper compensation. Richard's face went pale. That accident from back then, you remember, don't you? My father suffered for the rest of his life from the effects of that accident and passed away. Our family fell into debt. My mother got sick, Diane continued. That's why I planned my revenge. I married Robert and had a child, and I aimed to harm Mr. Thompson when I got the chance. Robert spoke with a hopeless expression. So our marriage and Chloe? It was all for revenge, but Diane's voice trembled. After Chloe was born, everything changed. I started to really love that child. Then why did you leave? Jessica asked. Robert started to feel guilty. He told me to give up on revenge, but I couldn't. Diane continued with an even darker expression. That's why I threatened Robert, to create a work accident, and that's why Mr. Miller was injured. Jacob trembled with anger. So my 15 years, I'm sorry, but I had no other choice. I had to get revenge for my family. So what happened next? Mr. Peterson asked. Robert threw me out of the house and he started living with just Chloe. I lived alone for 15 years and watched Chloe grow up from a distance. Diane continued with a sad smile. Chloe's feelings for Miss Sarah, her revenge plan, it was all because of the sense of revenge I instilled in her since she was a child. Lily snuggled closer to her mother as she listened to this complicated story. She could feel how much the adult's feelings of revenge and resentment had hurt so many people. So why did you show up now? Robert asked. Chloe is dying, and I want to finish what I started, Diane replied. Just then she pulled a portable charger from her pocket. We need to watch Miss Sarah's last video. There was a reason I cut the power. Everyone was surprised. Diane had deliberately cut the power. Why would you do that? Richard raged. What Miss Sarah has to say at the end, I have things to explain after you hear it. Diane connected the charger to the laptop. The screen turned on again, and Sarah's video continued to play. The reason I drank that poison was to protect Chloe. Sarah's voice echoed. Everyone was shocked. Sarah had drunk the poison willingly. The Sarah in the video continued to speak. I knew Chloe wanted to kill me, but she's a victim too. She's lived with a sense of revenge since she was a child. So, to prevent Chloe from becoming a murderer, I drank that poison myself. Diane started to cry. Sarah did that for Chloe, and I entrust Leo to you. I don't want this child to suffer because of the adult's sense of revenge. Those were Sarah's final words. When the video ended, there was complete silence in the room. Everyone was thinking about Sarah's sacrifice. Diane was the first to speak. I ruined everything. My thirst for revenge ruined Chloe. It even made Miss Sarah sacrifice herself. Jacob's knees gave out and he collapsed to the floor. Sarah, with such an intention. What do we do now? Jessica asked, holding Leo in her arms. Robert spoke with determination. Diane and I must turn ourselves in. We must take full responsibility. But then, Chloe, Diane worried. Chloe must also accept her crime, but if we explain the truth, her sentence might be reduced, Mr. Peterson explained. Just then, Jacob stood up and approached Leo. Is this child really my son? Mr. Peterson, who had seen the DNA test results, nodded. Absolutely, Jacob cried as he looked at the baby. Sarah, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Jessica handed the baby to Jacob and spoke. From now on, his real father should raise him. No, Jacob said, shaking his head. We should all raise him together. That's what Sarah would have wanted. Richard agreed. Yes, love is more important than blood ties. Lily gathered her courage and spoke. As long as Leo is happy, that's all that matters, right? If everyone loves him. The adult smiled at the innocent words of a 4-year-old, but there were still unresolved issues. Diane spoke one last time. Tell Chloe, tell her mother is very sorry, and that she says to let go of revenge now. Just then, Robert's phone rang. It was the hospital. When he answered, his face went pale. Chloe. Chloe is awake, and she wants to say something important. Everyone looked at each other. It seemed like there was one final truth left. On the way to the hospital, everyone's heart was filled with complex emotions. They wondered what Chloe would say last, whether there was another secret. But this time, they hoped that all the truths would finally come to light. When they arrived at the intensive care unit, Chloe was in much better condition than before. She was conscious, and there was a peaceful expression on her face. "Thank you all for coming," Chloe said in a weak voice. Diane approached her daughter and held her hand. "My Chloe, your mother is so sorry. It's all my fault you're in this state." Chloe looked at her mother and cried, "Mom, you were alive." "Yes, I watched you from a distance for 15 years, but I never had the courage to come to you." Chloe nodded and spoke. "Now I understand everything. Why I was so filled with a thirst for revenge." Jacob approached and asked, "What is the last thing you want to say?" After a moment's hesitation, Chloe spoke. "Actually, I told you one more lie." Everyone tensed up. "What lie now?" "Sarah. She didn't really commit suicide." With this confession, silence fell over the room. "So you really did kill her?" Jacob asked angrily. "No. It's true I gave her the poison, but the reason Sarah drank it was different," Chloe continued, crying. "Sarah realized I was going to harm Leo, so she made a deal with me." "What deal?" Jessica asked. "She asked me not to touch Leo in exchange for her own death, and—" Chloe's voice trembled even more. "She asked me to take good care of Leo." Jacob collapsed to the floor. "Sarah, to protect her child?" "Yes. Until the very end, Sarah only thought of Leo, and she told me, 'Choose love instead of revenge.'" Richard asked in a shaky voice, So did Sarah really forgive all of us?" "Not only that," Chloe pulled out a small envelope. "Sarah gave this to me at the very end. She asked me to deliver it to everyone." Inside the envelope were several letters. Each was addressed to Jacob, Richard, Jessica, and the future Leo. Jacob opened his letter. Inside were Sarah's final feelings. "Jacob, I'm so glad you woke up after 15 years. Leo will look a lot like you. Please raise this child with love. Live looking at the hope of the future instead of the pain of the past." Richard's letter said, "Mr. Thompson, thank you. You treated me warmly and provided a safe home for Leo. Please let go of the guilt of the past and start a new life." Jessica's letter was even more emotional. "Jessica, thank you for loving Leo like a real mother. You showed that love is more important than blood ties. Please continue to be Leo's mother from now on." Finally, Jessica read the letter addressed to Leo. "My dear son Leo, your mother wants you to grow up with love. Don't suffer because of the mistakes and resentments of adults. Love the world with a pure heart. And remember, you were born from the love of many people." After the letters were read, everyone in the room was crying. Sarah's final love and forgiveness were washing away all the resentment. Chloe spoke one last time. I want to live the way Sarah wanted me to. When I get out of prison, I will help people. I will choose love instead of revenge." Diane held her daughter's hand tighter. "Your mother will be with you. We will heal the wounds we created together." Robert also nodded. "Me too. I will live my life asking for forgiveness." Jacob stood up and looked out the window. 15 years, and it was a very long time, but now I can make a new beginning. Richard also spoke with determination. "I will also make up for my past mistakes. I will establish a foundation for workplace safety and prevent such accidents from happening again." Jessica smiled as she looked at the baby. "And we will raise Leo together. Regardless of blood ties, we will all be this child's family." 3 months later, all legal issues were resolved. Chloe, Diane, and Robert turned themselves in, but due to their sincere remorse and the forgiveness of the victims, they received relatively light sentences. Jacob legally proved his existence and was registered as Leo's biological father, but he didn't want to raise the child alone. Richard Thompson's mansion was now a real home. Jacob as Leo's father, Jessica as his mother, and Richard as his grandfather began to raise the child together. The nanny, Mrs. Evans, found happiness by continuing to care for Leo. "My Daniel is smiling down from heaven." Mr. Miller, David and Frank started working at the new workplace safety foundation that Richard established. They had chosen prevention over revenge. Maria was no longer a housekeeper, but a part of the family, and Lily helped take care of the baby. "How's Leo's big sister?" "Lily, because you saved Leo, we were all saved," Jacob said to Lily. Lily replied with an innocent smile, "I just helped a sick baby. The adults starting to love each other. That's the adult's success." A year later, Leo was growing up healthy. He had Jacob's eyes and Sarah's smile, and he was growing up with Jessica's warm care, Richard's wisdom, and Lily's pure love. Chloe sent a letter from prison. "Hearing that Leo is growing up well makes me happy. He's growing up in a loving home just as Sarah wanted." One spring day, the whole family was gathered in the garden. Leo was laughing in Lily's arms, and the adults were enjoying a peaceful afternoon. Jacob looked up at the sky and murmured, "Sarah, we're living the way you wanted. Your child is happy." Just then, a gentle breeze blew, rustling the leaves. It was as if Sarah were answering. Richard took Leo in his arms and spoke, "When this child grows up, let's tell him how we chose love." Jessica nodded. "Yes, let's tell him we chose forgiveness over revenge, love over resentment." Lily said to Leo, "Leo, we all love you, and we always will." As the sun set, the sky turned orange. The mansion that was once cold was now filled with warm laughter. 15 years of resentment and revenge had been transformed into love and forgiveness through the innocence of a child and the sacrifice of a woman. Leo would grow up with the love of many people, and the adults would start a new life by healing the wounds of the past. And it all began with the brave cry of 4-year-old Lily. Love was stronger than revenge, and forgiveness was more beautiful than resentment, and family was built more with the heart than with blood.